great traditions, they all agree that there are at least 4, usually 5 major states of consciousness that everybody has access to. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep are the simplest. I'm writing these just across the top as gross, subtle, causal, and non-dual. The waking state, dreaming state, deep, formless sleep state. What we find is that if you take somebody at a particular stage of development, and here I'm using the simple Gene Gebser stages. So I've written archaic, magic, mythic or traditional, rational or modern, pluralistic or postmodern, and integral or higher. And again, there are several higher stages. We're not saying that integral is the very highest, but this is enough for us to work with. You can be at a traditional mythic stage, and if you experience these states, you'll interpret it in those terms. Because you only have the mind to interpret what's arising. And so we get a grid here that shows these, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 24 different types of spiritual experience that you can have. In the gross waking state, if we look at states just very briefly to show what's involved, in the waking state, for example, you might have a peak experience where you're one with everything that's arising. And that's often called nature mysticism. In the dream state, though, one of the first things you notice about the dream state, the way that Vedanta and Vajrayana define it, is there's no gross objects. There's no physical body, there's no nature, there's no Gaia. It's just a subtle realm of images and light and feelings and emotions. And that's a kind of deity mysticism, if you feel one with luminosity or light that's not merely from the physical realm. So that subtle deity mysticism is typical of a dream state peak experience. And deep formless state, a peak experience there, is classic formless mysticism, or cessation, or the vast earth sprung, the emptiness out of which everything springs. And meditative states that are just formless, like nirvi, kalpa, samadhi, or nirod, or nirvana, all of those N-I-R prefixes mean without, or not. So it means, again, just that vast formlessness with no objects arising at all. And the non-dual ever-present is that which is aware of all of these. And it's one with everything that's arising. So it's sometimes confused with nature mysticism, which it shouldn't be, because that's just oneness with gross objects. But non-dual can be one with subtle objects and causal. And so it's ever-present, 24/7, timeless, noticing of everything that's arising. If you have a peak experience, as I was saying, let's say you're at the mythic stage or wave of development, and you have an experience of a subtle being of light. And you come from a culture that's Christian, you very likely interpret that as Jesus, perhaps. And because you're at an ethnocentric level of development, you will believe that unless somebody has an experience of Jesus, they can't be saved. It's a very, very common thing that happens. And so a lot of the world's religions, because they started at the ethnocentric level, again, it's not bad. I mean, we all go through it, and some Republicans never get out of it. I do not want to pick on Republicans. There's very evolved Republicans, I'm sure. We try to integrate Democrat and Republican. Let me make my official statement for the record. It's very common. It's culturally molded. If you're in China or in Southeast Asia and you have an experience of light, it might very well have 10,000 arms. It might very well be Avalokiteshvara. You're never going to find a Southern Baptist seeing 10,000 arms. I mean, it's just very, very rare. And so the ethnocentric part, though, is nobody can be saved unless they believe my God, or unless they believe my Jesus, or my Jehovah, or my Allah, or my whatever it is. That's very, very common at the ethnocentric level. So, again, but somebody can have, you can be at the rational level of development, like Bertrand Russell was, for example, and he had the experience of nature mysticism, but he interpreted it, of course, in rational terms. That's almost all you can do. I want to point out two things in this regard. One is that, I don't care what stage anybody's at, all 4 states are available at all 6 stages. So even a 6-month-old has access to gross, subtle, causal, and non-dual realms of reality, states of consciousness. But a 3-year-old doesn't have access to some of these higher stages. They just haven't grown or developed yet. So as a person unfolds through these stages, they're still going to have access to the states, but they're going to interpret them at the stage they're at.